But generally, when there's problems in performance inside of a company, it's because number one, they lack insight into performance.
At Elements of Culture, we sit down with experts in leadership and team building to explore the DNA that drives a thriving organization.
Welcome today to the Elements of Culture podcast. My name is Julie, and I have the privilege today to be speaking with Dana Therrien. He is the Vice President of CRO Practice at Anaplan. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so I am super excited to talk to you today. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you've gotten this far? I would love to hear your history.
Yeah, so I have a unique role at Anaplan where I have an opportunity to speak to chief revenue officers and heads of revenue operations and then other executives inside of a company about sales strategy and performance. We have a solution that caters towards more effective planning and execution in those organizations. I got to this position because of my background in sales and revenue operations. I led that function for lots of different companies throughout my career. Prior to joining Anaplan, I was with an analyst firm where I wrote lots of research on the topic and I was an advisor to companies. And then naturally, I started to work with companies that were providing software solutions that catered to the space. So I helped them develop their products, I helped them market their products, and then Anaplan brought me on as a representative of the individuals that we're selling to, and somebody that's done what we're selling to do for other companies.
That sounds amazing. So so I just want to ask, just in your background, because you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
As say you've been doing this for 30 years. Talk to me about what the last 30 years has been like in sales. Because I can only imagine, because we're moving so quickly and we're changing so fast. I think especially in the last 20 years with technology. Talk to me about how you've seen sales strategy and just the corporate environment change over the past 30.
Yeah, well, my undergraduate degree is in accounting, and I just thought that was a good base for understanding how a corporation operates. Let's say at the T level, at the T schedule level. But then I was given an Army scholarship while I was there, an ROTC scholarship for the U.S. Army. Who knew they had a finance corps? I didn't know that, but I was commissioned as a U.S. Army officer, and then I had some really interesting assignments. My first one was in Belgium at NATO headquarters. I had lots of exposure to international officers and what was happening in Europe at the time. This was in 1990, and then coming out of that, I was assigned to U.S. Army intelligence. So I was a finance officer that was managing the budgets of these dark money programs that you hear about, on the news stations. I was deeply involved in that. But I was always fascinating. I started with finance and then it turned more into operations. And then it was more about execution. So from there, I got into, let's say, a high tech company. And I always gravitated towards the operational side of it. I think as a 30-year-old, I was running a $400 million division of Lucent Technologies in the Northeast where we were installing telecommunications products. There were union people that were there. There were project managers and it just continued to expand in that. And there was such a human behavioral component to it. I had an opportunity to go into sales, not as a salesperson, but as the operations ends of sales back in 2000, 2001. And I've been there ever since. And I draw the parallels between sales and the military because really the world is your battlefield and the markets are the individual fields of battle, and you're deploying resources in each of those as efficiently as you possibly can to try to meet the opportunity. And it's a really giant strategy and operations exercise on an annual basis. And I just learned how to do that working beside a chief revenue officer or a chief sales officer and trying to help them be as effective as they possibly can. So I've been doing that since 2000, 2001, and I've just continued to lead that function for lots of different companies. And eventually, I'm more of an advisor to other companies who are doing it.
Dana, do you think your military experience has given you an advantage over others?
I think it has because when I first joined corporate America, let's say in 1995, I spent 5 years as a military officer. I got out as a captain. I was recruited by a military veteran, and there were companies that were focusing on recruiting only veterans at that time, junior military officers they call them. I think there's still other ones that are out there doing that because they recognized by the time I was 22 years old, going into my first assignment, I had been through ROTC, I'd been through all the academic and the on-hands training, and then I've been through the military academies that I was required to go to. They probably spent $1 million on me. That was before I was 22, and now we don't spend that kind of money on people who are mid-career. And so I think it helped to develop me as a leader. It gave me perspective. You go through practical exercise, and I don't see where executives today, or even mid-level executives inside of companies, have been afforded that opportunity to practice their leadership skills in a non-live fire environment. Let's say there's no
Yeah.
training environment for them.
So I was reading a little bit of your history and I wanted to know, like, so when you're looking at organizations and you say you advise quite a few of them, tell me how an organization goes from being a strong performer in the market to being a leader in the market. Like, what are some things you're seeing organizations lacking that just kind of creates that gap? So they perform strongly, but they're not the leader in the market.
Yeah, I think when I've joined organizations that are struggling, generally there's a couple of, and I'm talking about sales organizations, and that's since expanded into go-to-market organizations. So it includes marketing and sales and customer success. That's been driven largely by people buying subscription services, because you can measure the entire experience of a customer from their first interaction with a company all the way to the point where they become a customer and now they're renewing. It's driving efficiency throughout that entire process so that they have a pleasant experience as they're going through it. But generally, when there's problems in performance inside of a company, it's because, number one, they lack insight into performance. They don't know whether what they're doing is working, or if they do try something, whether it's going to work or not. So I would say I first focus on providing intelligence to the organization. So that means getting all the data infrastructure in place and all the reporting infrastructure in place, and then rising it up to the individuals who need to be able to see it in order to make a decision. And when I
Mhm.
first started doing this, the priority was on rising it to the executives so that they could make a decision about what was happening in their organization. And now it's been driven down multiple levels, all the way down to the individual salesperson, so that they can become the CEO of what they're responsible for. Let's say their territory. So fix that first. Provide intelligence so that people know whether or not what they're doing is working, and the things that they're trying, whether it's going to work or not. The second thing is the reward system. Sales compensation is often what they call it. As companies develop, they're much like countries. The older the country gets, the more laws they develop. And then the laws start to take over, and then you become a servant to the law instead of a servant to what you were trying to do. So it becomes too bureaucratic, and the compensation plans become too bureaucratic. And salespeople and the people on these compensation plans don't know what to do. They try to figure out how they could possibly earn money, but they're having to manipulate the compensation plan in order to do what's right for the customer and what's right for themselves. So they put too many performance measures in there. Their rules are too complicated. Their goals are too high. It's unfair. It's unequitable. It makes for a rotten environment. And then when that happens, you lose your top performers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mean, you just nailed it because I think that's what we're kind of hearing across the board with some of the sales teams that we're helping is the compensation structure. They're trying to manipulate it as much as they can. And it's because I think it's more restrictive than it is, seems like a benefit. And so, and it's complicated. Some of them is super complicated. We've seen some compensation plans that are super complicated. And so, what does a good compensation plan include?
There's some principles around a good compensation plan. Is they should be designed to pay for performance. So that means that let's ask, why would you put somebody on a compensation plan in the first place? And you're really at a very rudimentary level. You're paying them to achieve a level of persuasion of a customer to buy your products and services. So you're just paying for persuasion. You're rewarding that persuasion. If you can keep that in mind, it's that simple, then you're not going to overcomplicate the plan. So what does it mean to not complicate the plan? We have things called performance measures inside of compensation plans. They're quotas, individual quotas. And it might be, I need you to sell product, I need you to sell services, and I need you to pay attention to margin. And there might be other elements, but you want to try to keep that to no more than three. Because over three, it just becomes overly complicated, and people start to focus on the ones where they can maximize their earnings, and they'll discard everything else.
Yes.
And then they generally weight that you'll be giving a target incentive, and then they'll weight that target incentive across those three measures. Let's say 50% on this, 25% on that, and then 25% on the other one. If you weight anything less than 15%, they don't pay attention to it. So you're throwing money away. And the way companies will try to get around that three measure is that they'll create a third measure that has five things in it, and they'll create a blended measure. So I guess the overall principle is don't overcomplicate the plan. Keep it simple. Keep the quotas easily understood, and then don't overburden people with too many of them because you confuse them.
Yeah. So, what does that do to the team dynamic and the team culture when the compensation plan is so complicated? Like, does it do something, or do people most sales teams you see can push through it?
You know what's really funny, if you see a more mature company, and I won't name any of them because I've been privy to their compensation plans, but let's just say they've been very successful. They've had massive growth. They're multi-billion dollar companies operating at a global scale. If you look at the performance of their sellers, it generally follows a bimodal distribution. So if you think of a bell curve, the ideal distribution is you want 65% of your people at or above quota. And then you'll have a right-hand tier of top performers, where generally it's 15% of the organization, and then low performers of 15%. They don't have that nice bell curve. They've got a bimodal distribution with lots of low performers and lots of high performers. And those high performers are the ones that are most tenured inside the company. They went through that indoctrination period and the hazing of having a bad territory with bad accounts, with high quotas that they couldn't possibly achieve, and having quarters and years of not achieving numbers. But they got themselves to the right hand side. They established trust. They learned the system internally, and then they also learned how to negotiate the territories and their quotas. So they've got an advantage over those people who are joining the company. They're the haves. They figured it out, and they're not gonna share with the new people who come on board because they fought for what they got. And part of it's a fault of sales management too, because if you've got an opportunity that comes in the door, who are you going to give it to? The person that you've been working with for 5 years, or the brand new person you hired last month? So generally, I mean, the young inside of a company just generally don't have a shot. There's some people who are very tenacious,
Yeah.
and they'll make it through there, and maybe they'll even get lucky, and then they'll make it over to the right hand side. Um, so that bimodal distribution is generally what kills performance inside of a company, because you have the haves and the have-nots, and then you've got preferences that are happening, and then you'll just never develop those younger people. And when I say
Yeah.
younger, I'm talking about people new to the organization.
Yeah, but as you talk about development, I want to actually go into mentoring and coaching because one of the clients that we have had brought up the fact that they've been developing and mentoring and coaching, and they feel like they do it well, and but they are losing their talent as they develop and mentor people. And I know you are very passionate about mentoring and coaching people as well, and take that with intentionality. Talk to me a little about your experience with mentoring and coaching, and just some advice on how do we retain talent and how long do we retain talent?
I'll talk about it on a personal level. So the personal mentors that I've had in the military, I mentioned that I was assigned to Belgium. I'm from Maine, and like I wasn't very worldly. I was 22 years old, and then I was coming out of my officer basic course, and they said, "Okay, Therrien, you're going to Belgium." I said, "Well, where's Belgium?" And I looked at it on a map, and I ended up there. And then there was a person. It was a woman, Major Ann Fletcher. She was my first boss. So when you get off the plane in Belgium, it looked like 1940 for just for starters, because you get off in an airport. It was 1991. They still had those flip charts in the airport where they were changing the flight schedules and things like that, and everything looked like black and white. It felt like I stepped off at the end of World War II. Not no dismissal to Belgium. It's a gorgeous country, but they were behind at that time. But there was somebody there meeting me. Captain Todd Brown met me there, and he brought me to his home that day, and him and his wife fed me, and they fed me for the next 3 years. And Major Ann Fletcher and her husband David Fletcher, Lieutenant Colonel David Fletcher, they fed me for the next 3 years. And they took care of me. And when I was making mistakes, they pulled me aside and told me what was happening. So it was very personal. It wasn't scaled. It wasn't what we see in sales enablement, where we flood people with decks and recordings and webinars and things like that. It was one-on-one interaction. And that Major Ann Fletcher, when I was going to my second assignment, I told her they were going to send me to an undesirable location. She said, "Don't worry, I've got it." She was at the Pentagon. She pulled some strings, and next thing you know, I'm going to Washington, D.C. So it was coaching, mentoring, and then also taking care of somebody. And now this is 30 some odd years later, she comes to her and her husband, they come to my house for Thanksgiving and spend a week every single year, just based upon 2 years of service together. But when I moved to DC, I stayed with them. It was personal. And I don't see in corporations where we've optimized every interaction, where we've got call recording solutions trying to determine whether or not I used the right keywords when I was speaking to you and distill it down into something very basic. It's not there. So I would say in coaching and mentoring, you have to bring the personal relationships back, and people have to genuinely care about one another. That made
Yes.
all the difference in the world to me.
Yeah. So Dana, how do you do that when you have a team of 30? Like, or a larger team? Is there a way to do that? Or is it just the intentionality of just every interaction to be just really intentional with you caring, not that you need to follow the policies and the keywords, but just intentionally caring and therefore it naturally comes about? Is that what you feel like?
Well, I would say the way it worked. So Todd Brown picked me up, and his wife Janet, they took care of me. I did that for 5 other people after, and then the same thing with Ann Fletcher and David Fletcher. I've done this with dozens of people. So I think if you don't have the capacity to do it for 30 people all at one time, but if you can focus on a couple of individuals and then set the expectation that they're going to pass it along. I know
Right.
this sounds like kumbaya and things that people generally don't like to talk about inside of corporations, but it really does work this way.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
I
So
think it's
I would say
veering that
pass it
way.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think the corporate culture is shifting. So I think what used to work is not working anymore. And I think we have a place that I think as young people, they didn't get the mentoring and the coaching that some
Yeah.
of us have been privy to in previous generations, I think. And so I think they are looking for that. Talk to me a little about how you have hard conversations with the people you're mentoring and coaching and how you guide them through a mistake, an error, or hey, this approach was not great. How does that kind of look like for you? And just the younger people coming in. And younger, I mean just younger to the company.
I don't like having a conversation about somebody's performance doesn't have to be a hard conversation. If you go into it with the mindset that you're not going to penalize them for making a mistake, because we all make mistakes, and really high performers give themselves the freedom to make mistakes as many times as they need to make those mistakes until they've achieved the next level. So it's when you have trust between two individuals and they understand that you're not just in it to try to point out their deficiencies and the mistakes that they made and then to dispose of them because it's convenient and you'll get rewarded for that inside of a corporation, then they'll listen to you and then they'll really want to do it.
Yeah.
But you see, I work in the technology space and we have forecasting solutions out there for salespeople. And weak managers will go into these forecasting solutions and they'll track every activity that their salesperson did 3 days ago. And then they'll critique the meetings and the conversations and the lack of emails. It's used as a bludgeon instead of something that's there to help coach and mentor and give them feedback. So it depends. It's really incumbent upon the manager to be the person who genuinely cares about the people who that they're working for. And I say working for because you're there to support them and to help them out. Uh,
Yeah, I love what you said about people need to understand that they're not going to get penalized for a mistake because I don't think that culture really exists right now. I mean, there's some subtlety in it, but I think most people feel like if they make a mistake, it's detrimental to their future in the company or detrimental to their promotion, detrimental to whatever it looks like. And I think that creates if you can unwall that, I think that could create a lot of trust.
yeah. So I had the fortunate opportunity to go through that amazing mentoring opportunity inside of the military. But when I get out of the military, I was still searching for that ideal philosophy, something to be the guiding principle for myself. And I ended up getting into martial arts and studying Eastern philosophy. And I did it under the tutelage of a Taoist master for 18 years, every day with him and with his top student. And it was very personal. It was very interactive. And one of the ideas about when you're doing this is difficult. It's physical. And one of the principles was that you never talk about mistakes. So
Yeah.
as humans, we have this. I've seen it so many times. I do it myself. When you make a mistake, you want to explain yourself.
Yeah, you want to justify
Like, hey,
yourself.
hey, Dana, you just screwed up. And the first reaction is like, okay, let me tell you why I did it. And like, no, we don't want to hear why you did it. We want to talk about how to do it differently from this point forward. So I think if you dwell on people's mistakes, then you're reinforcing the pattern and then you're making them self-conscious. It's like, okay, we know you made a mistake. Let me show you how to do it differently. And let me demonstrate how to do it differently because I've been where you are before and I'm going to show you how I overcame it.
Yeah. So, Dana, talk to me a little bit about when you see a healthy, like a sales team. What kind of attributes do they have? When you see that's one's coached well, that's supported well, good compensation plan, what does that look like? What would a healthy sales team look like?
I think that the first test of one is if they're using humor in their communications. Like if the manager is speaking to their teams and there's kind of a lighthearted conversation that's happening and they're able to use humor with one another, that's a litmus test for a healthy environment, I think, where it's just serious and they're sticking to scripts and then it's penalizing. It's the toxic place to be. But then it's that level of individual honesty and communication that's happening between people. And what I found is that high performers like to coach other high performers. And I know some really great salespeople who are just master strategists. I learn from them every single day, and I ask them questions, and they're so willing. That what they really want to do is they want to help you achieve the level of success that they've achieved. On the opposite of that, what I've seen is people who have risen to the level of chief revenue officer. And I was always surprised. I thought, okay, this person has risen to this level. They've been through the gauntlet. They've suffered whatever they needed to suffer in order to get there. Now they're going to be a steward to help other people get them there. But more often than not, those are the people who said, I've got mine. The hell with you. You get yours now. I've been through it. I made it. And they're not there to coach those people. And we all have great intuition. We know who those people are.
Yeah.
Run from those leaders when you see them.
Yeah. So, as you're speaking on that, talk to me a little bit about can leaders be developed or is that something innate? Like even being a high performer, as you just said, like now you have CROs that don't want to help or coach and run for those types of leaders. But is that a development issue or do you think that's an innate ability or do you think that's something deeper?
I think people who have an innate leadership ability are easy to develop than those that do not. Yeah. So I think it helps if they've had that leaning towards leading and mentoring others. Back to the military experience when between your junior and senior year in college, you go to they call it Camp All American, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. So it's a leadership exercise where sometimes you're standing in the ranks. Most of the times you're standing in the ranks, but every so often you're pulled to the front and you're asked to lead the activities for that day. You're asked to lead the unit. And the best leaders were the best followers.
So
There were
good.
these people that when they got in charge, they thought they could command from the pulpit and tell everybody what to do. But as soon as they were among the ranks, they were disruptive. They weren't following. They were trying to sabotage the person in charge to make them look bad. So that person, I would say, doesn't have innate leadership capabilities. They could scream all the right commands, but they couldn't command trust and respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're picking a leader for a team, what are you looking for?
I have worked for some exceptional sales leaders before, and it was a partnership in the roles that I had. I was always more comfortable and enjoyed being the chief operating officer instead of the chief executive officer. I've never well, when I first got into sales operations, they called me the chief operating officer of the sales region. And so it was like we had a personal trust and relationship. Like I was his attorney and his lawyer. I mean, his lawyer and his accountant and his life coach all at once. And I would go out there and research all the options and come back and try to advise the person as much as I possibly could on what was happening. And that person reciprocated, took care of me, financially, career wise, was always looking for me to take the next step. So there was a reciprocal relationship that occurred between there and that trust. So when I'm looking for a sales leader to work for like that, I'm looking for that person where I can build that level of trust. And you hear it all the time. You don't work for companies, you work for people.
People.
So if you can find those people, follow those people, and go wherever they go.
Yeah. Dana, thank you so much for just being here with us. I do have one last question for you. In over all your years in working military, all your experience, is there one piece of advice that you've received that has helped you along that journey?
Don't compromise your integrity
That's so
under
good.
any circumstances. I don't care how much money they're offering you. You will regret it. The price you'll pay is not worth the reward they're presenting to you.
I think we have thrown integrity out the window in the
Yeah.
generation for the mighty dollar. I think that has happened. So we see that, and we do see the after effects of, people saying, we always tell people, is this the right fit for you? Not necessarily is it paying more, because the fit will tell me a lot about how that's going to overflow into your family, your personal life, your health, all the things that make somebody thrive. And
Yeah.
I think integrity, I think, is a little bit of a lost art, or even almost like it's not a mandatory thing for people anymore. It's supplemental.
It's not, you will be tested. We are all tested. And me looking back on the last 30 years and let's just say summing up the rewards that I walked away from as an incentive to compromise my integrity, that's the value that I place on it. And it's, it's millions of dollars when I've had the opportunity. And I'm so happy that I didn't take it
Yeah.
because I can look myself in the face in the mirror every single day.
Yeah. Dana, thank you so much. This has actually just been such a genuine conversation. I've so just really enjoyed having this conversation with you. I love what you're doing at Anaplan. Are you hiring? Do people need to find you?
Yeah, you can, the best way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn. And yes, we are hiring. I'm about ready to hire somebody in Europe in the next couple of weeks, but we're always looking for great talent, people who are passionate about what they do. And we'd love to have you join us.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dana. And thank you once again. Elements of Culture just wants to thank you so much for just carving out some time to just talk to us and just give us some of your insight and wisdom over the years.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah.